All right, Minnesota takes on Penn State, and that's going to be a 4 o'clock Eastern tip-off on Thursday, February 17th, 2022. Penn State's minus 5.5 at home, totals 127. And we're 2-0 in our last two crowd pleaser teasers on BrockPage.com. And if you want to access today's crowd pleaser teaser on my website, the link for that pick is in the description section below. Now, I'm going to handicap the entire slate on these videos, not going to leave many games out, but if you want to see which one of these free picks that I'm actually betting on personally, there's only one way to do that, and that's to sign up for a membership on my website at BrockPage.com. We have packages beginning at just $1.99, and when it comes to this Minnesota-Penn State game, it's actually the Nittany Lions who've been very good against the point spread here recently. Penn State covered in 7 out of their last 10 outings. And they're also 8-4 straight up at the Bryce Jordan Center. Seth Lundy scoring 13 points per contest along with 5 rebounds. Meanwhile, Sam Sessoms is drilling 42% of his three-pointers and also averages nearly 12 points a game. Now, when it comes to defensive play in this one, the Lions allow only 64 points a game at home, and they're limiting their opponents to just 39% shooting from the field in Happy Valley. They're taking on a Minnesota team who lost 8 out of their last 10 themselves, and they're also winning only 33% of their road games. Now, the Gophers are scoring only 65 points a game when they travel, and they're making only 69% of their free throws in that same category. Now, total-wise, 4 out of Minnesota's last 6 fell under the line. Meanwhile, Penn State 6-3 to the under in their last 9. I'm going to lean toward Penn State minus 5.5 and the under 127. Next matchup, it is going to be North Texas versus Florida Atlantic. And that's going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. North Texas is minus 2.5, totals 122. But despite being favored on the road here, the Mean Green has had significant problems getting on the scoreboard away from home. North Texas is averaging only 63 points a game when they travel. They're amongst the worst in the nation in road defensive boards. Now, they're taking on a Florida Atlantic team who won 7 out of their last 9. And they're winning only 80% of their ball games at home. Michael Forrest is averaging over 14 points a game. He's also drilling nearly 40% of his three-pointers. Meanwhile, Elijah Martin's making over 40% of his three-pointers himself. He's also scoring 13 points per contest. Now, the Owls have been scoring a whole bunch of points at home this year. They're averaging 80 points a game in the FAU arena. They're making nearly 40% of their three-pointers there as a team. Now, when it comes to the number in this one, FAU saw their last 6 straight all get over the number. They're also 8-1 to the over in their last 9. Meanwhile, North Texas saw overs recently with UTEP, Louisiana Tech, and Old Dominion. I'm going to lean toward Florida Atlantic plus 2.5 and the over 122. Next ball game, it is going to be Middle Tennessee State versus Florida International. And that's going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern start time. MTSU is minus 4, totals 142. But despite being favored on the road in this one, the Blue Raiders are winning just 30% of their contests away from home. When it comes to defensive play in this one, these guys have been pretty bad when traveling. They're allowing only almost 76 points a game on the road. They're having a pretty tough time guarding the 3-ball in that same category. They're taking on a Florida International team who's 10-3 straight up in front of their home fans. And they're also draining 40% of their three-pointers on their home court. As a matter of fact, the Panthers are scoring 79 points a game at home. And they're in the top 20 in the country in home three-point percentage. Tevin Brewer is scoring 15 points a game along with 3 boards and 6 assists. Meanwhile, Denver Jones is draining 90% of his free throws. He's also averaging over 12 points a game. Now, total-wise, FIU went 8-3 to the over in their last 11 at home. Meanwhile, Middle Tennessee State's 80% to the over in their road games for the entire year. I'm going to lean toward Florida International +4 and the over 142. Next matchup, it is going to be Old Dominion versus Marshall, 7 o'clock Eastern start time. Marshall's -2 with the total at 146. Now, the Thundering Herd is scoring a whole bunch of points at home this year. They're averaging nearly 80 points a game in front of their home crowd. And they're led by Tavion Kinsey, who's scoring almost 20 points a game, along with 5 rebounds. Meanwhile, Andrew Taylor, he's averaging over 13.5 points per contest himself, along with 5 boards and 4 assists. Now, they're taking on an Old Dominion team who lost 7 out of their last 10. They covered the point spread in just 30% of those ball games. Now, the Monarchs are also winning just 27% of their road games this year. They're averaging only 63 points a game in those road contests. Now, total-wise, when it comes to the number in this one, ODU's 7-3 to the over in their last 10 outings. They're also 80% to the over in their last 10 meetings with Marshall. So if you're into historical trends, you certainly want to think about that one there. Meanwhile, the Herd's 5-1 to the over in their last 6 themselves. I'm going to lean toward Marshall -2 and the over 146. Next contest, it is going to be Wichita State versus Cincinnati. That's going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern start time. Cincinnati's -2 with the total at 136. Now, the Bearcats are 11-4 straight up in the Fifth Third Arena, and they're playing very well defensively there. As a matter of fact, the Bearcats are allowing only 62 points a game in front of their home fans. And they're also limiting their competition to just 39% shooting from the field in that same category. Now, scoring-wise, David DeJulius is averaging over 14.5 points per contest, along with 2 boards and a couple assists. Meanwhile, Jeremiah Davenport scoring over 13.5 points a game, along with 5 rebounds as well. Now, Cincinnati is one of the better teams in the AAC in offensive rebounding. They're taking on a Wichita State club who actually lost 6 out of their last 10. And they're scoring only 65 points a game on the road. Now, the Shockers are also amongst the worst in the conference in offensive rebounding away from home. When it comes to the total in this one, 5 out of Wichita's last 8 fell under the posted total. Meanwhile, Cincinnati saw unders recently with ECU, Temple, and this very Wichita State team. I'm going to lean towards Cincinnati -2 and the under 136. Next contest, it is going to be Troy versus Appalachian State. That's going to be a 6:30 Eastern tip-off. Appalachian State's -3 with a total at 126.5. Now, the Mountaineers got the W in 8 out of their last 10, and they covered the point spread in 70% of those ball games. Appy State is also 10-3 straight up at home this year. They're led by Adrian Delph, who scores 17 points a game, and he's also making nearly 40% of his 3 balls. Meanwhile, Donovan Gregory is averaging over 10.5 points per contest himself, along with 5 boards and a couple assists. Now, when it comes to defensive play in this one, the Mountaineers are allowing only 57 points a game at home. And they're currently in the top 10 in the country in guarding the 3 ball on their home court. These guys have been stifling on the defensive end of the court at home this year. Now, they're taking on a Troy team who scores just 67 points a game on the road. And they're also making only 41% of their field goals in that same category. Now, Troy also failed to cover the point spread here recently against the likes of Arkansas State and Louisiana. When it comes to the total in this one, Troy went 70% to the under in their last 10 outings. Meanwhile, 5 out of Appalachian State's last 8 fell under the total themselves. They're also 75% to the under at the Holmes Convocation Center. I'm going to lean toward Appalachian State -3 and the under 126.5. Next matchup, it is going to be Michigan versus Iowa, 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. The Iowa Hawkeyes are -5 with the total at 149.5. Now, the Hawkeyes are amongst the best scoring teams in the nation. They're actually in the top 5 in scoring on average per contest, and they're averaging nearly 90 points a game at home. Keegan Murray is scoring over 23 points per contest, along with 8 rebounds. Meanwhile, Patrick McCaffrey, he's scoring 11 points a game himself, along with 3 rebounds. The Hawkeyes are making nearly 49% of their field goals at home. They're taking on a Michigan program who I'm not so sure they can just keep up with these guys offensively. They failed to cover in 5 out of their last 7. They're also winning only 40% of their road games. Now, the Wolverines are giving up nearly 72 points per contest away from their home court. And they're actually having a pretty tough time guarding the field goal. Now, total-wise, Michigan's 60% to the over when they travel. Meanwhile, Iowa's 12-3 to the over in the Carver Hawkeye Arena. No real surprise there. I'm going to lean toward Iowa -5 in the over 149.5. Next matchup, it is going to be UCF versus Houston, 9 o'clock Eastern tip-off. Houston's -13.5, totals 137. But despite being absolutely dominant at home this year, Houston did fail to cover in 3 out of their last 4 ball games. And they're making just 64% of their free throws at home. So we're looking at a Cougar team who is struggling to cover the number. And the numbers that the books are setting, they just keep getting higher and higher. But anyway, they're taking on a UCF team who won 3 out of their last 4 themselves. And they're scoring 72 points per contest in their road games. Darren Green Jr. is drilling 40% of his 3 balls. And he's also averaging 13 points a game. Meanwhile, Darius Perry scores over 11 points a game himself, along with 4 boards and 4 assists. Now, total-wise, UCF 67% to the over in their road games. They also went 7-3 to the over in their last 10 meetings with Houston. So if you're into historical trends, plenty of overs to go around. Now, the Cougars went 60% to the over in their last 10 outings themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Central Florida Knights, +13.5, and the over 137. Next contest, it is going to be South Alabama versus Coastal Carolina, 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. South Alabama's -1 with the total at 134. But despite being the slight favorite on the road here, South Alabama's winning only 30% of their contests away from home. The Jags are also scoring only 67 points a game when they travel, and they're making only 30% of their three-pointers in that very same category. They're taking on a Coastal team who won 10 games at home already, and they're scoring 77 points a game in front of their home fans. Vince Cole makes 43% of his shots from beyond the arc, 15 points a game for the guard. Meanwhile, Rudy Williams is making over 44% of his three-pointers and also averages 13 points a game. Now, when it comes to rebounding the basketball, well, there's really not many who do it better at home. The Chants are currently in the top 10 in the nation in home offensive rebounding. When it comes to the total in this one, 7 out of the Chants' last 11 home games did fall under the line. Meanwhile, South Alabama's 70% to the under in their road games this year. I'm going to lean toward Coastal Carolina +1 and the under 134. Next matchup, little Big East action. I'm talking about Creighton versus DePaul. 10 p.m. Eastern start time. DePaul's -2 at home with the total at 140. And although the Blue Demons have struggled in certain areas this year, they actually do score an awful lot of points at home. As a matter of fact, DePaul's averaging 78 points a game in their own building, and they're amongst the better offensive rebounding teams in the Big East. Javon Freeman Liberty, he's averaging over 20.5 points per contest, along with 7 boards and nearly 40% shooting from three-land. Meanwhile, David Jones is averaging over 14.5 points a game himself, along with 7 rebounds and a couple assists. Now, they're taking on a Creighton team who failed to cover in 5 out of their last 7. And in addition to that, they actually have a handful of guys currently listed on the injury report. Davis, Christophilus, and Kaluma, they're all questionable to play here tonight for Creighton. And the Blue Jays, they've actually struggled scoring points away from home this season. They're averaging only 64 points a game when they travel, and they're making only 31% of their three-pointers in that very same category. Now, when it comes to the scoring in this one, 5 out of Creighton's last 8 road games fell under the posted number. They're also 60% to the under in their last 10 meetings with DePaul. Meanwhile, the Blue Demons on the other side of things, they saw 5 out of their last 8 fall under the posted total themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward DePaul -2, the under 140. All right, next matchup, little Pac-12 action. I'm talking about Oregon versus Arizona State, 9 p.m. Eastern start time. The Oregon Ducks are -4.5, totals 135. Now, Oregon's been playing some pretty good basketball here recently. They've gotten the W in 8 out of their last 10 ball games. They're also 5-1 straight up in their last 6 on the road. And speaking of road games, the Ducks allow only 67 points a game when they travel, and they're also limiting their competition to just 28% shooting from 3 land in that very same category. Now, scoring-wise, when it comes to offensive production in this one, Will Richardson's draining nearly 44% of his shots from downtown, and he's also averaging over 15 points a game. Meanwhile, teammate Jacob Young, he's scoring over 11 points a game himself, along with 2 rebounds and a couple assists. And speaking of offensive production, well, the Ducks are averaging nearly 73 points a game away from their home court. They're taking on a struggling Arizona State team who's got a losing record at home. And in addition to that, they also got the W in just 8 out of 23 ball games for the entire season. So this is a program who's definitely on a down year. The Sun Devils allow 70 points per contest in front of their home fans. And they're also amongst the worst in the Pac-12 in defensive rebounding at home. Now, when it comes to offensive production in this one, well, the Sun Devils are scoring only 63 points a game, and they're shooting just 39% from the field. This is a team that struggles on both ends of the court. Now, total-wise, 9 out of Arizona State's last 11 home games fell under the posted number. Meanwhile, Oregon saw 5 out of their last 8 ball games fall under the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Oregon -4.5 and the under 135. Next matchup I have for you, it is going to be San Francisco versus St. Mary's. And that's going to be a 10 o'clock Eastern start time. St. Mary's is -3, totals 132. And as dominant as the Gales have been at home, well, they did fail to cover the point spread in 3 out of their last 4 ball games. They're also having a tough time grabbing offensive rebounds. They're taking on a San Francisco team who won 5 out of their last 6 themselves, and they actually lost only 1 road game this year. And speaking of road games, well, the Dons allow only 60 points a game when they travel, and they're also in the top 10 in the nation in road defensive field goal percentage. This is a team who's been very difficult to score against when they travel. And when it comes to offensive production, well, they can score some points as well. Jamari Bouye is making over 40% of his three-pointers. He's also scoring 17 points a game. Meanwhile, Yawen Masalski is scoring over 14 points per contest himself and also averages 9 rebounds per contest. San Francisco is amongst the best teams in the West Coast Conference in offensive rebounding per game. Now, total-wise, the Dons are 5-1 to the under in their last 6 on the road. They also went 60% to the under in their last 10 meetings with the Gales. I'm going to lean towards San Francisco +3 and the under 132. Next ball game, it is going to be Utah versus Stanford, 11 o'clock Eastern start time. Stanford's -4 with the number at 141. Now, the Cardinal covered in 3 out of their last 4 contests. They also find themselves 10-3 straight up in front of their home fans. Harrison Ingram's averaging over 11.5 points a game, along with 6 boards and a couple assists. Meanwhile, Spencer Jones, he's scoring double-digit points a game himself, along with 4 rebounds. And speaking of boards, Stanford's currently in the top 10 in the nation in defensive rebounding per game. They're taking on a Utah team who lost 12 out of their last 13. They also posted a record of just 1-9 straight up when they travel. Now, the Utes are allowing a whole bunch of points away from home this year. They're giving up nearly 77 points a game away from their home court. And they're also having a pretty tough time grabbing defensive rebounds. Now, total-wise, Utah's currently 60% to the over in their road games this year. Meanwhile, Stanford's 8-5 to the over in their last 13 at the Maples Pavilion. I'm going to go ahead and lean towards Stanford -4 in the over 141. Next matchup, it is going to be Washington State versus UCLA. 11 o'clock Eastern tip-off. UCLA is -9.5, totals 129. And as good as UCLA's been this year, they've actually lost 3 out of their last 4 ball games. They covered the point spread only once during that span. And speaking of the point spread, well, UCLA failed to cover in 6 out of their last 10 meetings with Washington State. So if you're into historical trends, well, you certainly want to think about that particular trend there. And speaking of Washington State, they're one of the best defensive road teams in the country. They're actually in the top 3 in guarding the field goal on the road. And they're limiting their opponents to just 25% shooting from 3 land in that same category. Now, when it comes to offensive production, Michael Flowers is averaging over 13.5 points per contest, along with 3 rebounds and 3 assists. Meanwhile, Tyrell Roberts is averaging over 10.5 points per game himself, along with 2 boards and a couple assists as well. Now, total-wise, 7 out of Washington State's last 10 head-to-head meetings with UCLA got over the posted number. Plenty of overs to go around. Meanwhile, the Bruins saw 8 out of their last 11 at home get over the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward Washington State +9.5 and the over 129. With that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup of the show. It's not on our big screen, but it is going to be Washington versus USC, and that's going to be an 11:30 Eastern start time. USC's -11.5 with the total at 139. Now, USC got the W in 7 out of their last 9 ball games, and they're also 11-2 straight up in front of their home fans. Isaiah Mobley is averaging over 14.5 points per contest. He's also making nearly 40% of his three-pointers. Meanwhile, Boogie Ellis is averaging over a dozen points a game himself, along with 3 boards and a couple assists. Now, when it comes to defensive play in this one, the Trojans allow only 63 points a game, and they're also in the top 10 in defensive field goal percentage. They're taking on a Washington team who lost 2 out of their last 3, and they also have a losing record on the road. The Huskies have also been brutal on the defensive end of the court. They're allowing nearly 79 points a game on the road. They're letting their competition make nearly 49% of their field goals against them in that same category. Now, when it comes to the number in this one, the Huskies saw their last 5 straight get over the posted total. They also saw 5 out of their last 7 road games get over the line as well. Meanwhile, USC on the other side of things saw overs recently against the likes of Pacific, Cal, and Oregon. I'm going to lean toward USC -11.5 in the over 139. And with that, guys, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on BrockPage.com. If you guys do end up getting a membership here today on my website, just keep in mind you're going to get billed the day you sign up and then the first of every month following that. I always tell folks in every single video, the earlier in the month you sign up, the better. And guys, if you want to get access to every single pick that I give out on my website, you're going to want to sign up for my board member tier package. But most importantly, guys, got to thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. And with that said, guys, happy Thursday to you. Best of luck to you. I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at BrockPage.com.